Today I want to read a very familiar story. I'm going to be in the third chapter of Daniel, and I'm going to read verse 1 through, I think it's 17, I'm not sure. And yeah, and it says, Nebuchadnezzar, the king, made an image of gold whose height was threescore cubits, and the breadth thereof was 6 cubits, and he set it in the plain of Dura. In the province of Babylon. And then Nebuchadnezzar the king sent together the princes, the governors, and the captains, and the judges, and the treasurers, the counselors, the sheriffs, and all the rulers of the provinces to come to the dedication of the image which Nebuchadnezzar the king had set up. Then the princes, the governors, the captains, the judges, the treasurers, the counselors, the sheriffs, and all the rulers of the provinces were gathered together unto the dedication of the image of Nebuchadnezzar the king had set up. And they stood before the image and Nebuchadnezzar had set up, and the herald cried aloud, To you is commanded, O people, nations, and languages, that at what time you hear the sound of the cornet, flute, harp, sackbut, psaltery, dulcimer, and all kinds of music, you fall down and worship the golden image that Nebuchadnezzar the king hath set up, and whosoever falleth not down and worshipeth shall the same be cast into the midst of the fiery furnace, burning fiery furnace. Therefore at that time when all the people heard the sound of the cornet, flute, harps, sackbut, psaltery, and all kinds of music, that the people, the nations, and the languages fell down and worshipped the golden image that Nebuchadnezzar the king had set up. Wherefore at that time certain Chaldeans came near and accused the Jews. They spake and said to the king Nebuchadnezzar, O king, live forever. Thou, O king, hast made a decree that every man shall hear the sound of the cornet, flute, harp, sackbut, psaltery, and dulcimer, and all kinds of music shall fall down and worship the golden image. And whosoever falleth not down and worship, that he shall be cast into the midst of the burning fiery furnace. Then came there certain Jews which I have set over the fires of the province of Babylon, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. These men, O king, have not regarded thee. They serve not thy gods, nor worship the golden image which thou hast set up. Then Nebuchadnezzar in his rage and fury commanded to bring Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and they brought these men before the king. Nebuchadnezzar spake and said unto them, Is it true, O Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, do not serve my gods, nor worship the golden image which I have set up? Now if you be ready, that at what time you hear the sound of the cornet, flute, harp, sackbut, psaltery, and dulcimer, and all kinds of music, you fall not down and worship the image which I have made well, and if you worship not, ye shall be cast the same hour into the midst of the burning fiery furnace. And who is that God that shall deliver you out of my hands? And Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego answered and said to the king, O Nebuchadnezzar, we are not careful to answer you in this matter. If it be so, our God which we serve is able to deliver us from the burning fiery furnace, and he will deliver us out of thy hand. But if not, it shall be known to thee, O king, we will not serve thy gods, nor worship the golden image which thou hast set up. And he cast them in there. And we know the story that he cast them in there, and they did not bow. And the men that cast them in there were burned and killed. And there was not even the smell of smoke on their clothing or anywhere about them. And I thought about a young man. I worked for Carnation for 20 years. I was a trainer for 17. Although I did not train this young man, he was out of Montgomery, but he trained, and he had went through the third week. He was going to get the key. He got the keys to his company car. We had a meeting in Birmingham, and our district manager, he got up and gave what I call a blood and gut speech. He said that Carnation was first, that anything else in your life had to be second. And this young man, after the meeting was over, went and took the keys to the company car and dropped it there where Mr. Williams was. And he said, Mr. Williams, my God is number one. My church is number two. My family is number three. And I don't even see Carnation Company in the rearview mirror anywhere. And I forgot a lot of people but I never forgot this young man. Faith is something we talk about, but we don't have in sufficient quantities. We believe that when we sit on a bench, we don't come in, when I come into a church, I don't test the bench before I sit down on it. I just know that the man that made it, and the company that made it, they have made it to specifications. They've tested it. They know what it'll bear. And it's the same way with God. He's tested you. He knows what you can bear. Don't try to tell him what you can and cannot bear, because he knows. And so we don't test the bench. We just sit down on it. We trust everybody, it seems like to me, except God. We trust the airline pilot. We trust the surgeon. We trust all kind of people. We don't go on a plane and ask the stewardess to show us a copy of his credentials. We ought to have more faith than we do with the bench or the pilot or the surgeon. We at least believe that God is going to do what he said he was going to do. He's never lied to us. What if they told you that a pilot was good at takeoffs, but he was really bad on landings? What would that do to you? And in Hebrews, Paul devotes a chapter 11, to faith. And he said, faith is the substance of things hoped for and the evidence of things not seen. I heard about a family, the dad would eat the good part of the meat. Many times the wife would let him eat first so the children wouldn't see what they were missing. He'd eat the chicken breast, he'd eat the ham, and so that particular meal he eat the ham. And the kids come in, and the gravy smelled like the ham. They got the red-eye gravy and biscuits, and the gravy smelled like the ham, and it tasted like the ham, but the gravy was not the ham. It was just the substance of the things they had hoped for. You come home and somebody's burglarized your house. You didn't see the burglar, but you saw things that was missing. So you had faith that somebody had been there and took away your things. Examples of daddies, little boys jumping into their daddy's arms and them trusting him that he's not going to drop him and or her. And the Hebrew children trusted God and the fire because they knew they could trust him. They had trusted him in not eating the king's food. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they were in a bunch of people, and they were eating the king's food. These other people was. And Shadrach and Meshach and Abednego just requested pelts and water. And they said, well, if the king sees that you're not doing well, he'll take it out on us. And he said, just give us 10 days, I believe it was. And they fared better than anybody else did in that thing. This is the same, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. We need to know that the God we serve is able to deliver. Is there something that you believe in so strong that you would be like the 3 Hebrew children, that you would die for if it cost you your life, or like the boy I was talking about, your job? When you fail to carry out an order, you need to understand the consequences of your actions. They made up their mind, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, that individually or collectively they weren't going to follow that order. There ought to be things, just like those 3 Hebrew children, that we just won't do. Is there anything that you believe in so strong that you'd be willing to die for it? There ought to be some places you don't go and some things that you don't do because it's not congruent with what God wants you to do. You need to, whenever the 3 Hebrew children declared that they weren't going to obey that order, they didn't have to run them down to catch them. They were right there. When it comes to there are laws of man and there's laws of God, and we ought to follow the laws of man. until they contradict the laws of God. And there are things that we are to be willing, that there are not big compromise. When Nehemiah was rebuilding the wall, they wanted him to come down and talk, and he said, why should the work cease while I come down and talk to you? There's some things it's settled. There's no need in talking about it. And we are going to be tried in the fire. I heard about a man touring a foundry, and they was heating metal, and the tour guide told this man, said, I got to go down here, I'll be back, just watch this. And when he come back, the man was in a panic. He said, hurry, hurry, hurry. He said, what's the matter? He said, this thing's about ready to blow. And the man looked at it, and he said, no, that's just the baser elements. That's just those things, and they're belching and popping and complaining. He said, I got to turn the heat up so I can get them out of there. Is that what you do? Is you're just you're complaining? You know, I might make another video on it sometime, but you murmur, it just repeats itself. It just keeps going on and on. I heard that there are 10 commandments, but if he made 11, it should be, thou shalt not but bellyache. Heard a story about some men on a porch, and there was a dog howling. This fella come by, and he says, what's that dog howling about? And said, he's laying on a nail. And they said, why don't he get off that nail? And he said, well, it just ain't hurting him bad enough. So that's the way people are. They moaning and groaning and complaining and hollering, and it doesn't hurt enough to get off the nail. They just keep complaining. So I hope somebody got something out of this. I believe it was to somebody. May God bless you is my prayer.